And we are back with director Dallas Jenkins from The Chosen. I want to talk to you about the set and production and things along those lines. Were there any things that actually came up on set that weren't scripted, like things that you remember that you're actually shooting and you go, wow, what a great idea. Let's do this right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that happens often. Little jokes or little comments here and there, dialogue that we just come up with. The guy who plays Jesus, his name is Jonathan, and we really want to pursue the humanity of Jesus in this project. I mean, obviously the divinity is there. You're going to see miracles and all of that. He's the Son of God and he does godly things, but we really want to pursue the humanity as well. So sometimes we would discover when we were discussing things like, oh, it'd be really interesting to see Jesus do or say something like this. But a lot of times what happened was, and this happened at least half a dozen times, where a character was in a scene with Jonathan as Jesus, and perhaps it's a scene from Scripture, and Jesus character is saying to the other character, follow me, or he's giving him words of Scripture, and it happened at least a half a dozen times where the actor couldn't stop crying. I mean, it was just had such a deep emotional reaction or experience that wasn't scripted, wasn't planned. In fact, I had a couple actors even apologize to me, like, I can't say that line without crying. I don't know what it is. And I do think that there are times when, even though, we're not going to over spiritualize the performances, and Jonathan is not Jesus, and he'd be the first one to tell you that. But sometimes when scripture is being quoted, or when you're facing a call to arms or a call to follow, even if it's just acting, I think sometimes something happens deep inside, and that happened multiple times on the set.
You were talking about Jonathan, and here, playing Jesus has got to obviously come with the risk of a lot of criticism, but it seems universal. It seems like he's universally loved in this role. How did you make that casting decision? I mean, what sold you on him for that part?
Well, about 6 or 7 years ago, I was doing a short film for my church about the crucifixion from the perspective of the two thieves, and I was casting the two thieves. They were the main characters in this short film. And Jonathan had actually auditioned for one of the thieves, and but I found these two guys that I really liked, but I didn't have a Jesus. The guys who were auditioning for Jesus just weren't very good. So I had Jonathan audition for Jesus, and 10 seconds into the audition, I thought, oh my goodness, this guy's amazing. And I remember when we were filming, I thought, this is the best portrayal of Jesus I've ever seen, and it's only like 2 minutes of screen time. He's got the masculinity mixed with kindness and gentleness that you don't often see. Usually it's one or the other. And but then we've worked together a few more times on short films and vignettes. So when it came time to do this show, he was the first person cast. And yeah, the response has been overwhelming. I think there's something special about his performance. I think there's something special about what we're trying to do. I think people really respond to the human moments, and I think, and this is true, I think, of all the actors on the show, is we're really pursuing authenticity. And so not overplaying it, not making it overly formal and presented like often happens when you see Jesus projects. I think that has helped quite a bit. I think it gives life and humanity to these characters that usually are just background people, or they're all very monochromatic personality-wise.
Yeah, before we started shooting for your show, I was talking with you a little bit about the fact that a lot of times these supporting characters are used more like scenery, but in this series, the characters are much more developed. Did the pressure of writing these characters ever get to you, especially with Jesus? I mean, how do you navigate those waters?
Well, for sure, there's a lot of pressure, but you bring up a really interesting point, one that I haven't talked about much publicly, but I was in Israel a few years ago researching for the show, and I just wanted to be where Jesus was, and I hadn't been there before. And I was in Magdala, which is the birthplace of Mary Magdalene, and I really felt like, I don't know, I felt God's presence strongly, and I felt him kind of speaking to my heart, not audibly, but I just felt like he was very strongly saying to me, in a few years, this show is what people are going to think of when they picture my followers, Jesus and the disciples. Because I think you would agree that even though there's been lots of Jesus movies and miniseries, if you think of Peter, Matthew, Thaddeus, Thomas, you don't have in your mind a picture of those people. Because typically, I had someone once tell me, real quickly, I'll say this, but they said typically there's 3 disciples in a Jesus project. There's Peter because he's the famous one, there's Judas because he's the betrayer, and then there's the other 10 disciples. They're all the same. They're all just like one person. And you don't really have anything in your mind about that. And I felt like God was saying, this show is going to be what people think of when they picture these people, and I'm not going to let you screw it up. And at the time, I didn't know what that meant, or if that was God talking to me, or if it was just myself, or whatever. But here we are, a couple years later, and it has become the predominant Jesus project in the world right now. And people say, these people, these characters, when I read my Bible, I'm now picturing them in this way. That is a significant weight and responsibility, but I think it's also exciting to give them a life and a humanity that hasn't often been portrayed. And you can pick up on clues from Scripture and think of the historical and cultural context and use other resources as well to come up with plausible scenarios about who these people were.
Well, I really appreciate you being on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, Dallas Jenkins.